As Mu Chen and Mo Ling both focused their gazes on the black stone, which resembled an egg, Mu Chen was slightly surprised and glanced at the girl beside him. Clearly, he hadn't expected them to both pick the same item at the same time. This black stone, which showed signs of being scorched, seemed incredibly ordinary. However, when Mu Chen had first seen it, he had faintly sensed a strange, intense heat emanating from within. Mo Ling's large eyes flashed with a gleam of light. She quietly grabbed Mu Chen's sleeve and whispered in a voice only he could hear. Mu Chen, that black stone contains a phoenix flame essence. Phoenix flame essence. Mu Chen's heart stirred. The phoenix flame, naturally, was a unique fire type from the Phoenix clan, incredibly domineering. The phoenix flame essence was the crystallized essence of this fire, which would be of immense benefit to those cultivating fire type's spiritual energy. It was considered a priceless treasure. What surprised him, however, was that although he could vaguely sense unusual fluctuations within the black stone, Mo Ling was able to discern the exact contents of the seal. How did you sense that? Mu Chen couldn't help but ask through a telepathic message. Mo Ling blinked her watery eyes and grinned, saying, "Because I have an extraordinary innate perception. No seal can block my senses." Mu Chen was taken aback. He hadn't expected this little girl to possess such a unique ability. No wonder she could accurately identify the treasure sealed inside the black stone. This phoenix flame essence, in terms of value, far surpassed 50,000 supreme spiritual liquid. For those cultivating fire-type's spiritual energy, it was a coveted treasure. Mu Chen glanced at Mo Ling, whose eyes were sparkling. His heart moved, and he asked, "Do you want it?" Since Mo Ling was likely from the Phoenix clan herself, she naturally possessed the Phoenix flame. Absorbing this Phoenix flame essence would undoubtedly be highly beneficial for her. Mo Ling quickly nodded, but then seemed a bit embarrassed, saying, "But I don't have enough supreme spiritual liquid. And even though we know what's inside, we might not be able to break the seal." With only a 30% chance of success, there was a real possibility that they would fail and the stone would shatter. "Either way, we have to try," Mu Chen said with a smile. Since entering the Divine Beast Plains, he had taken most of the benefits, while Mo Feng had entered the Body Refining Tower, and Nine Nether and Mo Ling had been waiting outside for a long time. He didn't need to worry about Nine Nether, but he did feel a bit indebted to this little girl, Mo Ling. Now that he had a chance to get her something she needed, he was willing to spend 50,000 supreme spiritual liquid. With that, Mu Chen stopped hesitating. He stretched out his hand and, with a pull, the crystal orb containing the black stone fell into his palm. At the same time, he flicked his sleeve, sending a jade vial flying toward the thin man under the stone tree. The man caught it with ease, sensing it briefly before nodding. With a snap of his fingers, the spiritual energy line connecting the crystal orb was severed. The cold crystal orb landed in Mu Chen's palm, and with a firm grip, he shattered the orb. The black stone, still radiating heat, fell into his hand. The egg-like black stone was rough on the surface, bearing signs of being burned. It had ancient patterns on its surface, remnants of a seal, which appeared to be extremely mystical and obscure. Mu Chen held the black stone and closed his eyes slightly. Spiritual energy flowed into the stone, probing the ancient seal within. After a long while, he opened his eyes and frowned. This seal was indeed peculiar. Breaking it forcefully wouldn't be difficult, but there was a high chance it would self-destruct, destroying everything inside along with it. To break the seal intact, he would need to find a special method. "The material of this seal seems quite unique," Mu Chen murmured. After probing for a while, he finally realized that the most crucial part of the seal lay in the ancient patterns on the stone's surface. These patterns were a dark red color and contained a strange pressure. "It's a seal made from the blood of a super divine beast. No wonder it hasn't been erased by the passage of time, even after thousands of years." Mu Chen thought carefully and finally made the connection. The pressure felt similar to that of a super divine beast. Though it had been diluted many times, he carried the spirit of a true dragon and phoenix within him, so he was still familiar with the aura of such a beast. "Mu Chen, big brother, how is it? Can you break the seal?" Mo Ling asked eagerly. Beside him, Mo Ling couldn't help but curiously ask. Around them, there were several people watching Mu Chen, clearly eager to see what this fool who spent 500,000 supreme spiritual liquid would manage to open. Even the skinny man turned his gaze over. He could vaguely sense that the items he had sold still held some value. He had even thought about ruthlessly opening them all, hoping for some luck. If he could uncover a real treasure, then the cost would be worth it. But he had never anticipated his luck would be so bad. Nearly every seal he opened ended in failure, with nothing gained in the end. The repeated failures gave him a psychological trauma, and he was too afraid to open them himself again that he feared that his bad luck would lead to total failure. If that happened, it would be a complete waste. So, instead of trying again, he chose to sell them this way, still able to make some supreme spiritual liquid back. Under the gaze of Mo Ling and the others, Mu Chun pondered for a long time before slowly speaking. I can give it a try. After gradually understanding the materials and structure of this seal, he had come up with a method. Although he couldn't guarantee 100% success, it was clearly much better than the brute force methods used before. With this thought in mind, Mu Chun stopped hesitating. His long fingers, holding the black stone, gently moved, and immediately, his spiritual energy gathered and formed into a series of spirit seals, which merged into the air. Once the spirit seals fused into the air, a small spirit array began to form in the palm of Mu Chen's hand, perfectly encircling the black stone in the center. This spirit array wasn't a particularly powerful one. It didn't possess any offensive abilities. However, it had the power of transformation, allowing Mu Chen's spiritual energy to enter without triggering the seal, breaking it from within. Although this spirit array appeared small, it required a high level of skill in spirit array formation. Fortunately, Mu Chun was already a master in spirit arrays, allowing him to set it up with ease. The true dragon and true phoenix patterns on Mu Chen's arms slightly stirred, and a trace of purple gold light quietly emerged, flowing into the black stone through the transformation of the spirit array. This ancient seal had been formed with the blood of a supreme divine beast, and ordinary methods could never remove it without damaging the contents. The only power capable of threatening it was that of another supreme divine beast. For example, the true dragon and true phoenix power in Mu Chen's arm. Only a power of the same rank could cause flaws in such a perfect seal, allowing it to be broken. The purple gold light points merged into the black stone and touched the seal's intricate markings, silently beginning to corrode it. The corrosion was extremely subtle, and Mu Chun dared not be careless. Fearing that one mistake would cause the 500,000 supreme spiritual liquid to go to waste, the surrounding onlookers, however, were unaware of his quiet actions. They assumed Mu Chun was just staring at the black stone, and many sneered, thinking another fool had been tricked. Only Jiuyo and Mo Feng curiously watched Mu Chun. Based on their understanding of him, they believed that if he acted like this, he must have some confidence. Mu Chun ignored the gazes around him, in his perception, as the purple gold light eroded the seal. A small crack finally appeared in the perfect seal's design. That moment, the seal exposed a flaw. Now, as soon as the crack appeared, Mu Chen's gaze tightened. Without hesitation, the spiritual energy he had infused into the black stone exploded from within, forcibly shattering the seal with immense force. Buzz! A brilliant light erupted from the black stone in Mu Chen's palm, and the stone cracked with a loud bang. Seeing this, the surrounding crowd couldn't help but scoff. It seemed that this fool had failed after all. The skinny man also shook his head, inwardly relieved, seemingly having tricked another unlucky soul. However, just as they were shaking their heads and about to look away, a fierce red flame suddenly erupted from Mu Chen's palm, and an overwhelming heat wave spread out. The space around him twisted as the temperature soared. The sudden change left everyone momentarily stunned. Then, a series of gazes instantly fixed on Mu Chen's palm, followed by a collective intake of breath, for in Mu Chen's hand, the black stone had vanished, replaced by a fist-sized crimson crystal, within which molten lava seemed to flow. Furthermore, the lava had solidified into the shape of a fire phoenix. Upon seeing the fire phoenix formed from the molten lava, several people with keen eyes in the crowd immediately narrowed their pupils. Then, an overwhelming look of longing surged forth from them, followed by a series of astonished exclamations. Is it the Phoenix Flame Essence. Under the stone tree, the thin man also gaped, his face showing an incredible expression. Chen looked at the Phoenix Flame Essence in his hand and couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Although the process of breaking the seal had seemed uneventful, the precision required was a result of incredibly subtle control over spiritual energy. Mission accomplished. Chen smiled lightly and handed the Phoenix Flame Essence to Mo Ling, who was standing beside him, her large eyes sparkling with excitement. "Thank you, big brother Chen." Mo Ling was ecstatic, carefully taking the Phoenix Flame Essence into her hands. However, just as Mo Ling received the Phoenix Flame Essence, a whip shadow suddenly cut through the air, directly wrapping around the essence. At the same time, a streak of light flew towards Chen. A cold, arrogant woman's voice followed. 600,000 supreme spiritual liquid. This Phoenix Flame Essence is mine. The woman's sharp cry suddenly echoed, carrying an undeniable tone. As her voice rang out, a whip shadow shot through the air, wrapping itself around the Phoenix Flame Essence in Mo Ling's hands. Meanwhile, the streak of light heading toward Chen was a jade vial, filled with supreme spiritual liquid. The sudden turn of events was so rapid, and the strike was so swift, that no one had time to react. Mo Ling could only stare wide-eyed, frozen in shock, watching the whip shadow coming at her. But just as the whip shadow was about to ensnare the Phoenix Flame Essence, a long hand materialized out of nowhere, gripping the whip tightly in the palm. Terrifying force surged, causing the whip to snap taut with a screech, but it could not advance an inch. The owner of the hand was none other than Chen, who remained expressionless. After grabbing the whip shadow, he casually flicked his sleeve, sending a gust of wind that sent the jade vial flying back. "I'm not selling." He spoke lightly, then flicked his finger heavily against the whip shadow. Immediately, the whip recoiled like a snake struck, quickly shooting back, accompanied by a muffled grunt. At this point, Mo Ling snapped back to her senses. Her large eyes filled with anger as she glared in the direction of the retreating whip shadow. There, a woman in red was staring at them, her expression a mix of anger and surprise. The woman in red had fiery red, curly hair, which made her look enchanting. Her features were exquisitely delicate, though there was a clear sense of unmasked arrogance in her expression. This arrogance was starkly different from Lu Qing's. Lu Qing had relied on Zhong Tong, using his influence to intimidate, but this woman's pride radiated from her very bloodline. It was an inherent arrogance. However, no matter how proud she appeared, Chen found it equally unappealing. He coldly locked eyes with the woman in red and said, "You didn't even greet us. Don't you think that's a bit uncivilized?" It seemed to be the first time the woman had been reproached like this, her eyebrows furrowed slightly. However, when she recalled her earlier hasty actions, she realized they might have been somewhat rash. Her imposing demeanor slightly weakened, though she still stubbornly responded, "The Phoenix Flame Essence you unlocked with 50,000 Supreme Spiritual Liquid. I'm offering 600,000, isn't that a fair deal?" Completely unreasonable. Chen's gaze was cold, his voice devoid of any sympathy. "Get lost. You're outrageous." The woman in red's delicate face flushed with anger. With a snap of her fingers, the fiery whip in her hand transformed into a fire dragon, roaring as it rushed toward Chen with brute force. The woman in red, though proud in nature, was far from weak in terms of strength. When her spiritual power erupted, it was evident that she had stepped into the 7th grade Supreme level, and even among the 7th grade Supremes, she was no pushover. Chen's gaze grew cold as he watched the roaring fire. Dragon approached, he threw a single punch, and as golden light surged, the punch struck the fire dragon with a speed like thunder. Boom! The fire dragon shattered instantly, turning into a fiery explosion that scattered into the sky. A whip-like shadow shot backward in response. The woman in red froze for a moment upon seeing this, her beautiful eyes narrowing. However, before she could say anything, her expression suddenly changed as Chen transformed into golden light and rushed toward her. The woman in red lightly tapped her jade foot, and her delicate body soared backward at the same time. Crimson spiritual energy swirled around her, transforming into a vast sea of flames that swept toward Chen. The rocks on the ground turned to ash in the presence of such dominating flames. Swish. However, Mu Chun's golden light-infused body directly pierced through the flames. Appearing like a ghost in front of the woman in red, he threw a punch. The golden light surged, and the punch shattered space itself. The woman in red's beautiful face turned serious. Her jade hands quickly formed a seal, and she struck out with her palm. Crimson flames gathered violently on her palm, turning it into molten lava. She slapped down with it, and the scorching temperature could incinerate the very heavens. Boom! The punch and the palm collided, sending a wave of searing hot air rippling outward. Mu Chen's body trembled slightly, while the woman in red was sent flying back several dozen steps. Her jade hand was marked with bruises, a dull pain radiating from it. Their exchange had been like lightning. As the woman in red was pushed back, the surrounding onlookers finally came to their senses upon seeing her. An exclamation of surprise filled the air. Isn't that the Phoenix Clan's Crimson Dance Fairy? Mu Chun was also slightly startled when he heard the exclamations. This woman was from the Crimson Phoenix Clan, a branch of the Phoenix Clan? Although it was just a branch, she undoubtedly had authentic Phoenix blood, and no wonder her strength was so formidable. From his estimation, her power was likely not weaker than 9 nethers. Earlier, the reason he was able to gain the upper hand with a single punch was because Crimson Dance had not gone all out. She had chosen a direct confrontation, but in this regard, Mu Chun had absolute confidence. Among the 7th grade Supremes, few could gain much from a physical clash with him. Even if she was from the Crimson Phoenix Clan, Mu Chun was mildly surprised. Crimson Dance looked at the pain in her jade hand, seemingly unable to believe that someone at Mu Chun's 6th grade Supreme level had actually injured her with a single punch. "You're truly hiding your strength," she said, her beautiful eyes fixed on Mu Chun. There was a peculiar gleam in her gaze, not admiration, but a fiery and eager challenge. Deep down, she was extremely combative. However, Mu Chun could not be bothered to engage with her. Even though she was from the Crimson Phoenix Clan, he had no interest in forming any alliances. He merely glanced coldly at Crimson Dance before turning to leave. "Hee, so you're here." Crimson Dance, "You're quite easy to find." Just as Mu Chun was about to leave, a soft, somewhat feminine laugh suddenly echoed in the air. The crowd parted, and several figures slowly entered. The leader of the group was a man dressed in white. That he was handsome, holding a folding fan, and exuded a somewhat delicate scholar-like aura. However, his narrow eyes occasionally flashed with a piercing light, as sharp as a blade. When the white-robed man appeared, Mo Feng's expression behind Mu Chun suddenly turned grim. Mu Chun glanced at the man, his brow furrowing slightly. He could sense a hint of danger from this individual. He was clearly no simple character. However, Mu Chun did not want to make trouble and prepared to turn away. "Were you the one who was getting hands-on with Crimson Dance earlier?" The soft, feminine voice came again. "If so, I advise you to stay right there and not move." Mu Chun slightly tilted his head, only to see the white-clad man in front of him gently shaking his folding fan. The fan stirred the cold air, causing it to surge and freeze the surrounding atmosphere into shards of ice. Meanwhile, the man's eyes were as cold as a venomous snake, locking onto Mu Chun with a detached gaze. "Bai Bin, my affairs are none of your business." Chi Hongwu's brows furrowed as she snapped at the white-clad man upon seeing him. Upon hearing this, Bai Bin merely smiled indifferently. His gaze shifted toward the people behind Mu Chun. When his eyes fell on Mo Feng and Mo Ling, he froze for a moment. Then, a mocking grin appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, what luck! I didn't expect to run into 2 little bastards here." Mu Chun's brows immediately furrowed as he glanced at Mo Feng. The latter's expression was dark, and his eyes, fixed on Bai Bin, seemed to contain a murderous intent. Chi Hongwu was stunned for a moment. She then cast a surprised look at Mo Feng and Mo Ling. In no wonder she'd felt a familiar fluctuation from them earlier. It turned out they carried the bloodline of the Phoenix Clan. However, she didn't seem to have seen them before. "You don't know Hongwu. The father of these 2 little bastards was once of our clan's high bloodline. However, he brazenly mingled with a woman from the 9 Nether Sparrow clan, tainting his bloodline. This angered the elders' court, and as a result, Their father was imprisoned beneath Black Mountain. These two, however, were also on our clan's wanted list. But due to some internal mediation, they managed to escape all these years, Bai Bin said with a smile. Chi Hongwu understood at once, but didn't. He seemed to care much. Since there had been internal mediation, it meant that the clan had already tolerated their existence. With that in mind, she wasn't inclined to intervene. However, Bai Bin's repeated use of the term little bastards was cruel and malicious. Bai Bin, seeing Mo Feng's dark expression, chuckled. It seems you two siblings have been hiding in the Nine Nether Sparrow clan all these years, and no wonder we haven't heard a word about you. But now, you're daring enough to show yourselves. He then glanced at Mu Chun. You're with them, aren't you? These two are sinners of our clan. Be why shielding them. You're opposing us. But I'm not from the execution platform, so this matter can be overlooked, Bai Bin continued, pointing to the Phoenix Flame essence. Hand this item over to me, and I will let these two little bastards go. Mu Chun narrowed his eyes as he glanced at the extremely gloomy Mo Feng, then at Mo Ling, whose eyes were reddened from being called little bastard so many times, looking pitiful. Anger surged in Mu Chen's heart. He slowly lifted his gaze and fixed his cold, steely eyes on Bai Bin. His voice boomed like thunder. Scram! As the thunderous words rang out, the feminine smile on Bai Bin's face froze, replaced by an overwhelming chill. A terrifying cold energy began to emanate from his body, causing layers of frost to form on the ground beneath him. Bai Bin glared at Mu Chun coldly and spoke slowly. Cut out your own tongue, and I will let you leave. Mu Chun chuckled, his smile full of undisguised mockery. Who do you think you are? He could sense the danger from Bai Bin and noticed that the latter was likely also from the Phoenix clan. However, Mu Chun wasn't scared. He had offended so many people that he no longer feared making more enemies. You think you can protect them? You're just seeking your own death. Bai Bin's eyes twitched, veins of bloodshot red appearing as his previously soft face contorted into a twisted expression. Clearly, this was the first time in years that he'd encountered someone who dared to disregard him so completely. And this person was merely a 6th grade supreme. Boom! As Bai Bin uttered the final word, an explosive cold burst erupted from the sky, and the temperature plummeted. Bai Bin suddenly opened his mouth, and an ice-blue cold breath rushed out, transforming into a ferocious ice dragon that carried a freezing aura. The dragon swiftly traversed the space and charged directly toward Mu Chun. Under the cold air's influence, even a 7th grade supreme would be frozen in place, let alone a mere 6th grade supreme, who would likely be turned into an ice sculpture in an instant. However, in the face of Bai Bin's relentless assault, Mu Chun did not take a single step back. Golden light surged around his body, emitting an aura of indestructibility that he threw a punch. His arm bulging with veins like a tightly bound cage, releasing an astonishing force. Boom! The two forces collided. Mu Chun stood firm without moving an inch, but he could clearly feel the poisonous, cold air invading his body at the moment of contact. This cold air sought to freeze the spiritual energy within him. However, Mu Chun didn't pay much attention to it that instant. The true dragon and phoenix patterns on his arms trembled simultaneously, completely devouring the cold air. The chill within his body vanished in an instant. Mu Chun remained expressionless as golden light erupted, and the full force of his physical strength surged out in that moment. The cold ice dragon crackled, fissures appearing on its surface before it shattered into countless ice shards with a loud cracking sound. Impossible! As the cold dragon shattered, Bai Bin's pupils constricted. The terrifying aspect of this ice dragon was not the power it contained, but the relentless extreme cold it emitted. He had clearly felt the cold air invade Mu Chun's body earlier, but how was it that the man was still able to unleash his power completely? Could it be that he was immune to Bai Bin's cold energy? At this thought, Bai Bin found it absurd. He was from the Ice Phoenix clan, with innate extreme cold energy within him. Even warriors of the same level from other races would be wary of this cold energy. There was no way it could be completely immune. Boom. But Mu Chun gave him no time to think. He stomped his foot, and cracks spread out from the ground beneath him. His figure turned into a golden flash, disappearing in the blink of an eye. In just one breath, He appeared before Bai Bin like a ghost, and the speed was enough to make Bai Bin's heart skip a beat. He could hardly imagine how Mu Chen, a mere 6th grade supreme, could possess such incredible speed. With golden light flashing ahead, Mu Chen's eyes gleamed as he struck out with his palm. The strike wasn't just fueled by his physical strength. It also unleashed the spiritual energy within him. The palm struck with a light motion, yet it left behind dark, terrifying space ripples. This was an anomaly caused by an overwhelming amount of power. Many powerful warriors around recognized the significance of Mu Chen's strike. Upon seeing it, their expressions changed. It was hard to believe that even a normal 7th grade supreme would struggle to withstand this blow. The terrifying gust of wind from the palm hit Bai Bin, and his expression changed drastically. His eyes grew serious as he no longer dared to underestimate his opponent. At this moment, he realized how formidable the man before him truly was, despite appearing to only be a 6th grade supreme. However, there was no turning back now, and Bai Bin felt no regret. Cold light flickered in Bai Bin's eyes as he quickly formed hand seals. Behind him, a massive ice phoenix began to materialize, its wings unfolding like a shield of ice, guarding him. Boom! Mu Chen's golden palm came crashing down without hesitation, directly slamming into the ice phoenix's wings. The shockwave from the impact rippled through the air, and the hardened ground beneath them cracked open. The ice phoenix's wings shuddered violently. Even though Bai Bin was protected behind the ice wings, he could clearly feel the overwhelming power. If that force had struck his body directly, he would have been severely injured, if not killed. However, being forced into such a position by a mere 6th grade supreme made Bai Bin's expression extremely dark. A murderous intent flickered in his eyes. Today he would make sure to humiliate this person thoroughly. With this thought, Bai Bin gritted his teeth, and the bloodline within him began to burn. Everyone could feel a powerful pressure, like a storm, sweeping out from his body. This pressure came from the oppression of his bloodline. As a member of the Ice Phoenix clan, Bai Bin's bloodline was noble and proud. Even ordinary divine beasts would be suppressed before him. Now that Bai Bin had ignited his bloodline, this pressure would reach its peak. At such close range, ordinary divine beasts would likely kneel before Bai Bin. The crowd around them quickly stepped back, as they could see that Bai Bin clearly intended to force Mu Chen to kneel, intending to utterly humiliate him. They swiftly retreated to avoid being caught in the crossfire and suffering embarrassment. Not far away, Chi Hongwu remained motionless, seeing Bai Bin's actions, her brows furrowed slightly. Though she was prideful and combative, she preferred to gain the upper hand in direct combat. She couldn't help but feel disdain toward Bai Bin's reliance on bloodline suppression to gain an advantage. That kid is in trouble now. Chi Hongwu thought to herself. Mu Chen's physical strength was indeed formidable, but Bai Bin was smart. By choosing bloodline suppression, even the strongest of physical power would be helpless against the weakness of one's bloodline. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Mu Chen also felt the overwhelming pressure approaching. However, strangely, no shock showed on his face. Instead, there was a faint, almost mocking smile. Bloodline suppression, huh? Mu Chen murmured softly, and then his hand clenched tightly. The true phoenix pattern on his arm glowed to know. As Mu Chen successfully reached the second layer of the dragon and phoenix scripture, these two patterns on his body took on a life of their own, and now they should perhaps be called the spirits of the true dragon and phoenix. You want to play with bloodline suppression? Let me show you what true suppression looks like. The true phoenix spirit erupted with intense purple-gold light, and the previously closed eyes of the phoenix suddenly opened wide in that instant. An overwhelming pressure seemed to burst forth. The pressure from the true phoenix spirit only lasted for a moment and didn't spread. It was aimed solely at Bai Bin. The others didn't notice a thing in that instant. The pressure emanating from the ice phoenix behind Bai Bin vanished as quickly as it came, as though a subject had bowed to its king. The ice phoenix let out a fearful, mournful cry, its body trembling and the cold aura receding. Bai Bin's face turned pale, his eyes filled with disbelief. The sudden pressure from Mu Chen made his bloodline tremble uncontrollably. Boom! Fear surged in Bai Bin's heart, and his legs buckled uncontrollably. Just as he was about to kneel, he snapped back to his senses, hastily trying to stop himself. However, One knee still touched the ground. The crowd, who had been waiting for Chen to be humiliated by the suppression of the Ice Phoenix bloodline, were left stunned, witnessing Bai Bin kneeling on one knee. Chi Hongwu also widened her eyes, her face full of disbelief. Boom, Chen's expression remained unchanged. His golden light palm, imprinted on the Ice Phoenix wings, suddenly shook, releasing a burst of true Phoenix aura that shattered the seemingly unbreakable wings. Bai Bin's body was sent flying, crashing into the ground, leaving a trail hundreds of yards long before he finally managed to stabilize himself. Puffed. Once stabilized, Bai Bin spat out a mouthful of blood, his once powerful spiritual energy quickly withering, a clear sign of serious injury. Yet, he seemed to be in a daze, staring blankly at Chen ahead of him, his face still ashen. The surroundings were eerily quiet as the experts from all clans stared at Chen. His body, now free of golden light, seemed ordinary. Yet after witnessing the previous battle, they knew full well what kind of terrifying power lay hidden in his seemingly fragile form. Where on earth did this guy come from? This was an expert from the Ice Phoenix clan, after all. Yet, here he was, utterly humiliated at the hands of this mysterious youth. Among the countless stunned gazes, Chen's eyes gradually returned to normal, and he once again looked at Bai Bin. His calm voice rang out, carrying a hint of dominance, but not a single person dared to challenge his words. These two, Chen, have already claimed them. As Chen's calm voice echoed across the area, Bai Bin's face instantly twisted with fury. His expression was filled with savage intent, as though he wanted to swallow Chen whole. Although Bai Bin may not be at the top among the younger generation of the Cold Phoenix clan, he still has Phoenix bloodline running through his veins that on usual days, he holds a high position, and ordinary beast clans show him respect. Who would dare to treat him like Chen does? Kill him. Blood surged in Bai Bin's eyes, his face twisted in a snarl as he growled. Behind him, several figures slowly stepped forward, their expressions unfriendly as they glared at Chen. That a torrent of spiritual energy emanated from them, creating a powerful sense of oppression. These people were clearly from the Cold Phoenix clan. While they were slightly weaker than Bai Bin, all of them had reached the 7th grade supreme level, making them a formidable force. The Cold Phoenix clan experts eyed them menacingly. 3 figures appeared behind Chen with a cold snort. Jiu Yu, Mo Feng, and Mo Ling. They stood firmly behind him, unyielding, and glared back at Bai Bin and the others. You insignificant 9 Nether Sparrow clan dare to be so insolent before my Cold Phoenix clan. Bai Bin sneered darkly. Hearing this, Jiu Yu smirked mockingly and said, "What big words. You're just an ordinary member of the Cold Phoenix clan. Do you really think you represent the whole clan? Once we're in the Divine Beast Plains, any conflicts are settled by one's own strength. Today's incident is your own humiliation. I'm sure when it gets back to the Cold Phoenix clan, not only will no one stand up for you, but you'll probably be scolded as useless trash." Jiu Yu wasn't concerned by Bai Bin's threats. The Cold Phoenix clan was just a branch of the Phoenix clan, and with their individual strength, they didn't have the authority to make the 9 Nether Sparrow clan feel threatened. Upon hearing this, Bai Bin's expression became increasingly volatile. If word spread back to his clan that he had been defeated by a 6th grade supreme, he would be mocked mercilessly. At worst, the elders might deem him unworthy of further training, which would be a devastating blow to his future. Haha, you really know how to stir up trouble. Not long after separating, and here we are with another issue. Just as Bai Bin was caught in a dilemma, a loud laugh suddenly rang out. The crowd parted as several figures strode in, exuding murderous intent. It was Han Shan and the experts from the Rhinoceros Demon clan. Han Shan scanned the scene and quickly understood what was happening. That he walked up beside Chen with a helpless sigh, saying, "You really know how to cause trouble." Though he said this, there was no sign of him backing away. Instead, he stood firmly by Chen's side, clearly showing where his loyalties lay. Those are Rhinoceros Demon clan members. That must be Han Shan, right? I've heard of him. He's a prodigy from the Rhinoceros Demon clan, and even among 7th grade supremes, he's a standout. Extremely powerful. I didn't expect the Rhinoceros Demon clan and 9 Nether Sparrow clan to be so close. Hearing the whispers around him, Mu Chun could only smile helplessly. This wasn't his fault. These guys had come looking for trouble. However, Han Shan's clear stance did make Mu Chun feel a bit better. Even knowing that Bai Bin was from the Cold Phoenix clan, Han Shan hadn't kept his distance, which showed that he was indeed someone worth befriending. When Bai Bin saw Han Shan's stance, his already gloomy face grew even darker. The Cold Phoenix clan experts behind him furrowed their brows. With the addition of the Rhinoceros Demon clan's experts, their side no longer had the advantage. Bai Bin's face was stormy. After a long silence, he took a deep breath, suppressing his anger, and coldly said, "This matter won't be so easily forgotten. I hope you have the courage to bear the consequences when the time comes." With that, he turned and left, radiating a cold aura. But everyone could tell that Bai Bin was likely fuming inside. The Cold Phoenix clan experts were somewhat unwilling to let this go. After all, they were from the Phoenix clan, and they rarely suffered such indignities. However, they were only ordinary members of the Cold Phoenix clan, and they had been split into groups entering the Divine Beast plains at present. Only a few of them had gathered, and had the others been here, neither Mu Chun nor Han Shan would have left unscathed. Thinking this, they could only grit their teeth in frustration, glare at Mu Chen's group, and then turn to follow Bai Bin. The onlookers, seeing that the confrontation had ended, shook their heads in regret. They had originally thought there would be a bloody battle, which would likely result in heavy casualties on both sides. At this moment, Chi Hongwu, who had remained silent, also shifted her gaze to Mu Chun. Her eyes flashed with a hint of fighting spirit. But in the end, she suppressed it and said, "Don't get too cocky. Bai Bin doesn't even rank in the top 5 of the younger generation in the Cold Phoenix clan, that if you think they are that weak, you'll regret it sooner or later." Her words clearly carried a hint of a reminder, and in this way, she was somewhat compensating for the rash action she had taken earlier. However, Mu Chun still felt little affection for her. He merely nodded indifferently, signaling that he had heard her. Seeing that Mu Chun was so ungrateful, Chi Hongwu clenched her silver teeth in anger. She stamped her foot in frustration, unwilling to say anything more, and turned to leave. As she walked away, she gritted her teeth and muttered, "I'll make you regret acting so smug. When the time comes, let's see if you can even escape with your life." Mu Chun watched the retreating figure of Chi Hongwu, his gaze slightly narrowing. It was hard to believe that Bai Bin couldn't even rank in the top 5 among the younger generation of the Cold Phoenix clan. If what she said was true, then the strength of the Cold Phoenix clan truly shouldn't be underestimated. No wonder they were called the Phoenix clan. She's right, Han Shan nodded solemnly, adding, "The powerful members of the Cold Phoenix clan aren't here today. Otherwise, things would really get difficult." Mu Chun slightly nodded and smiled. There are always strong enemies on the path of cultivation that if we only think of avoiding them, then it would be too boring. Han Shan was taken aback for a moment, then looked at Mu Chun with a hint of admiration. After a long pause, he said, "I have to say, Mu brother, I respect your mindset." He never backed down from anything, fearless in his actions. This kind of mindset was the true essence of what made someone a strong cultivator. It was no wonder Mu Chun, with his mere 6th grade supreme power, could face all kinds of talented youths from various clans without fear. Now Han Shan finally understood, and it made him feel a deep sense of awe. He could faintly sense that the future achievements of the man beside him would be beyond anyone's guess at that time. Even the entire Phoenix clan might not be able to shake him. Mo Fong, who had been silent, slowly regained his composure after Bai Bin left. He gave Mu Chun a deep look, hesitated for a moment, then said, "Thanks, but you don't need to get involved in this. That I can handle that guy." Mu Chun smiled casually. "I can't stand watching someone insult my friends." Mo Fong froze for a moment, then lowered his gaze, his expression complicated. After a while, he nodded slowly, not saying anything more. However, his younger sister, Mo Ling, who knew him well, could sense that he was far from calm on the inside. Given their backgrounds and experiences, even within the 9 Nether Sparrow clan, the word friend was rarely used. This had made Mo Feng's personality increasingly solitary and cold. Mu Chun didn't expect his casual words to stir any emotions in Mo Feng. After speaking, He turned his attention back to the stone tree in front of the thin man. Earlier, the 500,000 supreme spiritual liquid had yielded a phoenix flame essence, which was a huge gain. This had piqued Mu Chen's interest, as he had a feeling that the items this thin man was pulling out from somewhere were not ordinary. However, Mu Chen couldn't help but wonder if the thin man had used up all his luck while shopping, leaving him stuck with these treasures without being able to unlock them. The thin man, seeing that Mu Chen was once again focusing on him, felt his heart race. When he saw Mu Chen open the Phoenix Flame essence earlier, it felt like his heart was bleeding. If that thing had been in his hands, it could have sold for nearly 1 million supreme spiritual liquid. "What's this? Are you planning to try your luck again, brother?" the thin man asked with a dry laugh, trying to probe. He had seen how Mu Chen had cracked the seal earlier, and it was clearly a more refined method than the brute force approach. Mu Chen merely shrugged and said, "It's just luck." His gaze swept over the crystal orbs on the stone tree. Then he glanced at Mo Ling, who immediately understood. Her large watery eyes scanned them carefully, and she extended her small hand. Clicking on 3 of the orbs, Mu Chen didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, he pulled the 3 crystal orbs towards him and tossed out a jade vial. "This contains 1.5 million supreme spiritual liquid. Thanks, brother." The thin man's eyes twitched rapidly as he watched Mu Chen take the 3 crystal orbs. He had a premonition that the most valuable treasure in his collection was about to be taken by Mu Chen. Despite the unwillingness in his heart, under Mu Chen's gaze, the thin man could only force a smile, accepting the jade vial. But the smile on his face looked especially ugly. After witnessing Mu Chen's previous battle, the thin man already knew that the latter was no easy opponent. Someone like that should be avoided at all costs. With that thought in mind, the man could only endure the pain in his heart as he severed the spiritual energy light from the crystal ball. The 3 crystal spheres fell into Mu Chen's hands. He gently tossed them, feeling a hint of anxiety rise in his heart. This time, he had almost spent all of his supreme spiritual liquid, and now he could only trust Mo Ling's extraordinary abilities. He hoped that whatever was inside these 3 crystal spheres would truly be worth more than 1.5 million supreme spiritual liquid. Otherwise, he would be left with nothing.